cabin lights flicker once, twice, then plunge, Flight 462, into a darkness so absolute it feels like being swallowed whole. Outside, the storm rages, lightning etching skeletal trees onto the clouds below. Inside, a silence thicker than the humid Singapore night we left behind. A silence that doesn't just lack sound, but actively sucks it in. That's when you feel it. Not a sound, a presence. Cold, damp, clinging to the skin like cobwebs spun from frost. You pull the thin airline blanket tighter, but the chill isn't outside. It's inside, deep in the marrow. And it's watching. Captain Aris Thorne, a man whose hands knew the reassuring weight of a control column like an old friend, felt the first tremor not in the Airbus A350, but in his own breath. 30 years of navigating typhoons, volcanic ash clouds, even a near miss with a rogue drone over the Java Sea. None of it felt like this. This was a wrongness seeping into the pressurized cabin, a dissonance humming just below the roar of the Rolls-Royce Trent XWBS. He glanced at his first officer, Maya Lim. Her knuckles, usually relaxed on the throttle, were white. Her eyes, usually scanning the storm-lit horizon with calm precision, darted towards the cockpit door. Not fear, not yet. A primal alertness, the kind that wakes you seconds before the earthquake hits. Pressure holding steady, Maya reported, her voice tight. Turbulence moderate, nothing on radar but this soup. The soup was a monstrous anvil cloud, lit from within by continuous silent lightning, painting the cockpit instruments in stark, strobing relief. In C-12A, Eleanor Vance pressed her forehead against the cool, vibrating plexiglass. Below, the storm was a churning cauldron of purple and black. She wasn't afraid of flying. She was afraid of landing. Afraid of the echoing emptiness of her Kuala Lumpur apartment, the ghost of her husband's laughter still clinging to the curtains. David had loved storms. He'd stand on their balcony, face upturned, laughing as the rain lashed down. 6 months since the aneurysm stole him mid-sentence over breakfast. This trip to Singapore was supposed to be… what? A distraction? A pilgrimage to places they'd loved? All she felt was a hollow ache, a phantom limb where her happiness used to be. The storm's fury felt appropriate, a reflection of the tempest inside her. Across the aisle in 12B, young Leo Chen clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit. His mother slept fitfully beside him, headphones on, oblivious. Leo wasn't sleeping. His wide, dark eyes weren't fixed on the iPad glowing dimly on his tray table, but on the empty space near the front galley curtains. His small fingers dug into the rabbit's threadbare fur. He'd been quiet since takeoff, unusually so. Now he started to hum. Not a nursery rhyme, but a low, discordant tune, tuneless and unsettling, like wind whistling through a cracked tombstone. Thump. The sound was soft, muffled, like a sack of wet grain dropped onto the carpeted floor behind the thick cockpit door. Aris and Maya exchanged a glance. Impossible. They were the only ones forward of the reinforced bulkhead. Cabin crew. Aris keyed the intercom, his voice deliberately calm. Everything all right back there? A crackle, then senior flight attendant Raj's voice, strained but professional. All secure back here, Captain. Just a bit of rough air. A pause. Did you require anything? Aris frowned. Raj sounded breathless. Negative. Maintain stations. He released the button. The silence rushed back in, heavier now. The cold intensified. Aris could see his own breath misting faintly in the dim light from the instrument panel. Maya reached up, adjusting the air vent above her. Is it just me, or is it freezing in here? It wasn't just them. Eleanor shivered violently, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The cold seemed to emanate from the seat beside her, David's favorite aisle seat, always. She'd booked it empty, a foolish, sentimental gesture. Now the emptiness felt occupied, a pressure against her arm that wasn't there. A scent, faint but unmistakable, David's sandalwood cologne buried deep in her memory. A sob caught in her throat, grief playing cruel tricks. Leo stopped humming. He pointed a small finger towards the front of the darkened cabin. "Mama," he whispered, though his mother slept on. "The cold man is crying." Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound came from the cockpit door. Not a knock, not a scrape. Like fingernails, long, brittle fingernails, slowly, deliberately dragging down the metal surface. Maya recoiled as if physically struck. Aris felt his blood turn to ice water. Every rational explanation, loose wire, pressurization artifact, overactive imagination, evaporated in the face of that visceral, unnatural sound. He grabbed the internal phone, bypassing the intercom. "Raj, get to the cockpit door. Now! Do you see anything?" A beat. 2. Raj's voice, when it came, was a trembling whisper, barely audible over the phone's static. "Captain, there's nothing there. But the door, it's cold, ice cold, and there's something..." He trailed off, a choked gasp. "Raj, report!" Aris barked, the command cracking with a fear he couldn't suppress. Silence on the line. Then a sound that bypassed the phone, vibrating through the very structure of the aircraft, a low, guttural moan. It wasn't human. It wasn't mechanical. It was the sound of absolute despair, of a soul trapped in perpetual, frozen agony. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, resonating in the bones of the passengers, vibrating the fillings in their teeth. In the cockpit, the storm lighting flashed. For a fraction of a second, Aris saw it, reflected dimly in the dark, rain-streaked windshield. Not outside. Inside. A shape. Translucent, wavering like heat haze, yet radiating an intense, unnatural cold. Tall, impossibly thin, its form suggested tattered rags or perhaps withered limbs. Where a face should have been, only a deeper darkness, a void that seemed to pull the light and the warmth into its endless depths. It stood directly behind Maya's seat. Maya screamed, a raw, primal sound of terror that ripped through the cockpit's sterile environment. She twisted in her seat, eyes wide with abject horror, staring through the shape towards the door. "Get away!" she shrieked, flailing backwards, her headset tearing free. "Get away from me!" Aris, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, followed her gaze. He saw nothing but the closed door, the cold instruments. But the feeling, the crushing weight of sorrow, the invasive chill, the certainty of being observed by something utterly alien and malign. It was overwhelming. He fumbled for the radio, his fingers numb. Singapore Control, Singapore Control, Singapore 462, declaring PAN, 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 PAN. Singapore 462, go ahead, Pan Pan. The controller's voice was calm, a lifeline to sanity. Aris struggled to breathe, the air like shards of glass in his lungs. "Control, we have an emergency. Extreme psychological distress. Possible hostile." He couldn't say it, couldn't voice the impossible. Unidentified presence in the cockpit. Extreme cold. Crew incapacitated. Request immediate vectors for emergency descent and landing. His voice cracked on the last word. The controller's pause was infinitesimal, professional disbelief quickly overridden by the raw terror in Aris's transmission. Singapore 462, Roger, Pan Pan. Cleared direct to ILS approach runway 20C Changi. Descend immediately to flight level 100. Emergency services standing by. Report souls on board and fuel remaining. Aris rattled off the numbers, his eyes darting wildly around the cockpit. The cold was deepening. Frost was visibly forming on the edges of the windshield, creeping inward. The moan came again, louder this time, seeming to emanate from the very air vents. It was joined by another, and another. A chorus of desolation whispering just below the threshold of hearing, yet vibrating in the skull. Maya was curled in her seat, shaking violently, muttering incoherent prayers, her eyes fixed on a point just behind Aris. He forced himself to look. Nothing. Just the cold, the oppressive gloom, the flickering stormlight. Then a shadow moved, not cast by anything. A thing of shadow itself, detaching from the gloom near the ceiling, dripping cold like viscous ink. It flowed down the bulkhead behind him. He could feel its regard, a weight of ancient frozen grief that threatened to crush his spirit. Scritch. 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 The sound was back, louder now, on the door, on the ceiling panels. Multiple sources. Eleanor, in 12A, felt a wave of paralyzing sorrow wash over her, so intense it stole her breath. She saw David, not as he was, but pale, waterlogged, his eyes empty sockets, reaching for her from the empty seat. She clamped her hands over her mouth, stifling a scream, tears freezing on her cheeks. Leo started to cry, a high-pitched, terrified wail. "They're coming. The sad men are coming from the water. They're so cold. They want to be warm." He buried his face in his rabbit. In the cockpit, the chaos escalated. Warning lights flickered erratically. The primary flight display stuttered, showing impossible altitude losses and gains. The radio crackled with static, through which fragmented whispers seemed to bleed. Sighs, sobs, words in languages long dead. Maya suddenly lunged for the control column, her eyes wild. "No, don't take him. Don't take my boy." She grappled with Aris, her strength fueled by hysteria. "Maya, snap out of it," Aris shouted, wrestling her back. "It's not real. It's them. They're playing with us." He managed to shove her back into her seat, jamming his elbow against her chest. "Strap in. Now." He fought the bucking aircraft, the deceptive instruments, the suffocating cold, and the insidious whispers that promised only oblivion. The altimeter spun wildly. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, a deeper, darker storm was consuming them. He caught glimpses in the periphery, fleeting shapes of utter despair, figures hanging suspended in the air like drowned men in deep water, their forms blurred by cold mist, their eyeless faces turned towards the living warmth with a terrible aching hunger. "Singapore 462, confirm altitude. You are descending rapidly." The controller's voice was urgent now. "Trying to maintain," Aris gasped, fighting the yoke, his muscles screaming. Ice crystals formed on his eyelashes. The moans were a physical pressure now, vibrating the flight deck. Maya was sobbing uncontrollably, her hands over her ears, rocking back and forth. "Make it stop, please, make it stop." Then the cockpit voice recorder captured it, a moment of pure, distilled terror that would later be leaked, sending shivers across the globe. Aris's voice, ragged, barely recognizable. "Oh God, look at their faces." A choked gasp, then Maya's voice, a shattered whisper filled with unbearable recognition. "Thomas, my baby, is that you?" A pause filled with static that sounded like the rushing of deep, cold water. Then a final guttural moan, impossibly loud, resonating through the microphone, followed by Maya's piercing, soul-rending scream that cut off abruptly. The descent became a controlled crash. Aris, operating on pure adrenaline and ingrained skill, wrestled the shuddering Airbus down through the storm's fury. The landing gear screamed as it deployed. Changi's runway lights appeared through the sheeting rain, like the welcoming glow of a hearth fire seen from a frozen wasteland. He flared. felt the jarring impact of the main gear, fought to keep the nose down as the spoilers deployed. The A350 shuddered, screamed, and finally slowed, taxiing off the runway under its own power, guided by emergency vehicles, their lights painting the rain-streaked fuselage in frantic red and blue. Silence. Not the oppressive silence of the sky, but the stunned, fragile silence of survival. The cabin doors were opened. Warm, humid air rushed in, a shocking contrast to the deep freeze that had held them. Passengers stumbled out, weeping, shaking, embraced by ground crew. Eleanor was helped down the stairs, her legs buckling, her eyes vacant, fixed on some unseen horror. Leo clung to his mother, silent now, his face buried in her neck, his small body trembling violently. Paramedics rushed towards the cockpit. They found Captain Aris Thorne slumped forward in his seat, unconscious, his skin icy to the touch, his face etched with a terror that sleep wouldn't erase. First Officer Maya Lim was found curled on the floor behind her seat, alive but catatonic, her eyes wide open, staring at nothing, her lips moving soundlessly. Frost still clung to the inside of the windshield, the control panels, and the reinforced cockpit door. Deep, parallel scratches marred the door's metal surface. The official report cited mass hysteria triggered by severe turbulence and technical malfunctions leading to sensory deprivation and shared hallucinations. The leaked CVR tape, however, told a different story. The moans, the screams, the desperate, impossible words. Look at their faces. Thomas, my baby. These became digital ghosts haunting the internet. Eleanor Vance never flew again. She moved to a small cottage by a lake, far from any airport. She claimed the cold never truly left her bones. Sometimes, on still, foggy mornings, she swore she smelled sandalwood and felt an icy pressure on the empty chair beside her fireplace. Leo Chen stopped drawing airplanes. He drew only water. Dark, deep water. And shapes, indistinct and sorrowful, drifting in its icy depths. He wouldn't speak of the flight. He'd just hug his rabbit tighter and whisper, "The sad men are still cold." And Captain Aris Thorne, he resigned. He lives in a remote mountain cabin surrounded by sunlight. He avoids the cold, avoids the dark. But sometimes on the wind whistling down from the snow-capped peaks, he hears it. Faint, but unmistakable. That low, guttural moan. The sound of something lost, something profoundly, eternally cold. And he knows, with a certainty that chills him deeper than any mountain winter, that they aren't bound to the sky. They're simply waiting, hungry, and the cold places of the world are their doors. Share your story. What waits in your silence?